Hi, it's Jerome from Volunteer Burnaby. Today we're going to learn how you can learn any language. So before we even start, how do we actually learn a language? If you Google how to learn a language, you'll get a lot of different responses. Well, one of the ways we can find out whether something works or doesn't work in our society today is to use science. And there's actually a science of language called linguistics. A part of linguistics has to do with how people acquire language. And here we find the input hypothesis. Basically, the input hypothesis states that we acquire a language when we get comprehensible input. Well, what exactly is comprehensible input? To find out, I'm going to give you two different lectures in Korean. 사람은 머리가 하나 있고 다리 두 개 있고 팔도 두 개 있습니다. 사람은 머리가 하나 있고 팔이 두 개 있어요. 두 개. 그러면서 다리도 두 개 있어요. So even if you don't know Korean, you probably understood the message I was saying in the second lecture. And this is an example of comprehensible input, when we understand messages. By getting more comprehensible input, we acquire language. Now, if you still can't take my word for it, let me take you to a website called Antimoon. In about 2 years, a bunch of Polish people learned fluent English and wrote the site using the English they learned. Now, as a native English speaker, I can tell that their English is immaculate. And I think this just goes to show that input really does work. Okay, now that we know the science, how are we going to put this into our learning? Well, I think effective language learning can be broken down into 3 components: getting input, increasing comprehension, and allowing a silent period. Number 1, getting input. Input is really fun, and it really should take up the majority of the time you spend learning a language. Chances are, if you're like me, you probably spend a few hours every day watching television, watching Netflix, watching a few YouTube videos, and reading a book in the afternoon for maybe a half an hour. Well, if you spend that time, or spend some of that time, reading and watching television shows in your target language, you can get hours of input every single day. But should you watch children's shows or adult television dramas? The key part really is to watch and read what you have fun doing. Children's shows might be more comprehensible, but if they're not very fun for you, it's not going to be very effective for your learning. Now, on the other hand, if you decide to watch TV dramas, things might be a bit less comprehensible. However, there are still going to be bits of the show you're watching that's going to be comprehensible to you. And by sticking to it, you'll be able to gradually increase your ability in understanding what's actually going on. For example, you might only understand 10% of what's going on today, but maybe 2 weeks from now, you'll understand 20%, and so on, until eventually you're actually understanding so much that you can focus on the plot, and you're fluent. The key thing is to continue reading and listening even if you don't understand everything. Just being okay with not understanding everything and focusing on what you can understand and how you might improve from there. You can increase comprehension by doing things such as learning grammar and vocabulary. What I like to do is use a flashcard program called Anki. Whenever there's a sentence with one word I don't know, I highlight it and I make a flashcard for it. Anki schedules my cards, so I only need to study my cards when I need to. And by learning vocabulary that actually matters to me, learning is enjoyable and easy. You might also notice that I'm using a monolingual dictionary. The reason for this is when the language you're trying to learn is too different from your native language, the dictionary definitions aren't going to be very accurate. Plus, you're also getting free reading practice. For grammar, I would focus more on understanding what the grammar points mean as opposed to drilling the same grammar drills over and over again. Then, using my knowledge of the grammar, I would try to look out for those grammar points when I'm watching a show or when I'm reading a book. With all this said, however, keep in mind that your real progress is really happening when you get input. If you have 2 hours to dedicate to a language, for example, I would spend about an hour and a half getting input and only about 30 minutes studying grammar and learning vocabulary. Number 3, for the first few weeks or months of learning a language, I would actually allow a silent period where you don't deliberately practice speaking or writing your language. Now, it's okay to have the occasional conversation once a week or so, because really speaking a language can be a great source of motivation. However, as a beginner, it's very easy to make mistakes in the target language. And while mistakes in general are a great indicator of growth, in language learning, these bad habits can be very hard to get rid of later in your language learning journey. Therefore, it makes sense to just not make these bad habits from the beginning and only speaking and writing the things you know to be 100% correct. So that's it, just 3 components to learn any language. For the first few weeks or months, try not to speak or write too much. Watch some foreign television and get some foreign books. When the libraries do reopen, I recommend the Vancouver Public Library. They have an enormous foreign selection. And along with that, just a little bit of grammar and learning vocabulary that matters to you every day. And within a few months, you'll be understanding a lot more than you did today. Well, I hope this video helped you in some way. Be sure to check out the rest of the virtual series' videos. And bye-bye. I hope you and your family are staying safe.